Hi everyone, I'm Jimmy Muller. I'm the inventor and owner of Muller Choke Tubes. Today in this video I'd like to talk to you about why choke tubes matter. I've had a lot of people talk to me over the years and say to me, you know, choke doesn't matter. If you put the muzzle in the right spot, the target will break. That's absolutely true. They are spot on with that. But here's the problem. You could do that with a .22 rifle. You could do it with a .410. You could do it with anything. As long as you point it in the right spot, the target will break. Heck, you could shoot it with a slingshot, right? So the difference is when we shoot a shotgun, we need a margin of error because we're shooting a moving target, correct? So let me talk to you about this. So if the statement that they make was to be true, as long as you put the muzzle in the right spot, the target will break, then why would we go into these big competitions shooting 12 gauges, punishing ourselves with recoil, carrying all this big heavy ammo around, spending all this money on this big 12 gauge ammo? Why would we do that? Why wouldn't we just take our .410 out there to these main events, dump a couple boxes in our pouch, and go enjoy ourselves? No recoil, light gun, beautiful to shoot, all your ammo's in your pocket, you don't have to carry a big heavy shell bag around with you. Why don't we do that? Well, because patterns matter, okay? So if patterns didn't matter, we'd all be shooting .410s, all right? So next time you want to come up and say that patterns don't matter, just put the muzzle in the right spot and the target will break, that's a cop-out, man. So here's the difference between a good choke and a choke that's not as efficient, okay? When I made my chokes, the most important thing to me was to make efficient patterns. I wanted my patterns to be as efficient on the outer fringe as it was on the inside core, giving you the biggest margin of error with your shotgun, regardless of gauge. Doesn't matter if you're shooting a .410, 28, 20, or 12 gauge, or even 10 gauge using my chokes. You've got the biggest margin of error possible because of my gun-specific geometry, which gives you that very even pattern right to the outer fringe of the pattern. So let's think about that. So what I mean is, if you have a choke that shoots a very hot core, which a lot of the good chokes out there do these days, okay, especially the ones that are ported. Let's set up a teal target at 40 yards. Let's say it goes straight up in the air, there's no wind, it goes straight up, nice and true, and you put in somebody's light modified, and you put in my U2, okay? Sort of apples to apples. You go up on that 40-yard teal, and you start to move off to the side of it about a half a foot or a foot at a time with that competitor's choke that's shooting that hot core. When you're about a foot and a half off, you start to get really inconsistent breaks, maybe some dusting, no breaks. You take my U2, you could be off 2 feet any direction on that target, get a hard break every single time. And the reason for that hard starburst uniform break every shot on that outer fringe is because of my pellet efficiency on that outer fringe, which I created through my gun-specific geometry and materials. So when somebody says choke doesn't matter, they really don't know what they're talking about. Chances are maybe they've never patterned before. Maybe they just haven't tried other chokes than what they've been shooting for many years. The fact is, choke matters tremendously, okay? Which is the reason I developed mine back in 1993 to help myself, because there were no chokes out there being made that satisfied me. When I went out on a patterning paper and the shots were all different, the pattern uniformity was different, one shot would look okay, next shot would have holes all in the pattern. I would be on a target and I would smoke one target, the next target I'd be in the same exact spot and I would get a couple pieces off it. You know, it just wasn't practical and it wasn't efficient. So when I developed my own chokes and I learned that you had to change all these different things for every single gun to get the right uniformity for that gun to create the best margin of error that you could have, that's where my scores started going up. Now my customers' scores are going up. They're shooting better than they ever have before. That really is because choke does matter. So obviously there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to choke. You'll hear that in my videos. I will go through all this in detail in all the different videos based on different scenarios, different levels. And you know, when I'm talking either about ballistics or geometry or guns themselves, you're going to learn a lot through my video library about all of this. It's not going to be overwhelming. You're going to be able to pick and choose what you want to learn and what you want to take out of it. But I promise you, when you're done watching these videos, you're going to know more about shotgunning, more about ammo, more about patterns, and more about putting more X's on your scorecard than you've ever known before. You know, a lot of the information that we've been getting, even up to today, and probably for a long time going, we're getting information that was taught to us or read in books or created many, many years ago. 30s, the 40s, 50s. You know, we're still going by that same mentality. I'll give you an example. You know, I've talked to so many trap shooters that, you know, when you talk to them about choke, they will tell you, shoot any choke you want as long as it's full choke. You know, it makes me laugh out loud because they just don't know. You know, back when choke was defined and created, full choke was 70% of your pellets inside a 30-inch circle at 40 yards. Modified, 60%. Improved cylinder, 50%. Skeet, 40%, and so on, okay? Well, back then, when that was defined, that was true. A full choke did give you approximately 70% of your pellets in a 30-inch circle at 40 yards. Why? Because the ammo back then didn't have nearly what the components are today. The shot may or may not have been as good, usually not, unless it was Remington shot. Anything else was very inferior. The powders were horrible compared to today. The wads were not nearly as what they are today. The hulls, the primers, the casings, you name it, the crimping. The ammo is a totally different ballgame these days. It's nothing what it used to be. Then take it further. The shotgun barrels, the way they're made, machined, the tooling, the surface finishes, the metallurgy, the heat treatment, the guns that they're on. Just everything is so much different these days. Now let's talk about the choke part. Back then, choke tubes were not existent. It was just fixed chokes, okay? The fixed chokes back then, a lot of the good guns had a very long parallel length with a very long taper length. Gave you a lot of uniformity, a lot of transition time for that shot to settle in and come out nice. But the fact is, the barrels may have been very good, but the ammo wasn't. So, and a lot of barrels weren't very good either, unless they're some of the top brands, okay? So what happened was the pattern percentages that I just talked to you about that are defined the same way today are not what they are today. So basically what I mean by that is if you go out there and you buy a bunch of the top target chokes out there, and let's say you buy a full choke, okay? In most guns today, you take those full chokes, especially the ones that are shooting those hot cores, you will get 100% pattern at 40 yards inside a 30-inch circle. And as a matter of fact, many modified chokes out there these days, you will get 100% pattern at 40 yards with today's ammo, today's chokes, and today's guns. So how is it that somebody could say you can't shoot trap from the 16-yard line unless you're shooting full choke? That's absolutely insane. It makes no sense whatsoever if you think about it, okay, based on what I'm telling you here. All you're doing is handicapping yourself beyond comprehension, okay? So back in the 50s, when this stuff was defined, you were shooting maybe a 30-inch pattern, 28-inch pattern at a 16-yard line single trap target. These days, with that same so-called full choke, you're shooting maybe a 12 to 16-inch pattern at that same target. Why are you still shooting full choke? Because you're being told to. It's not because you know. It's because you're being told to by the top shooters from way back then. The Hall of Famers, the people that wrote the books, the people that shot the videos, the people that are still shooting the videos today, that are still preaching the same thing from way back then, that is totally obsolete today. Just like computers today. They're obsolete every couple of years. Well, guess what? Those old shotgunning tips are obsolete many years ago. So stop listening to it. Get your chokes, get your ammo, get out there on paper, get out there on targets and start practicing. And you're going to find that my U2 at the 16-yard line, which is basically equivalent to an IC light mod, you're going to crush 100 targets out of 100 with that U2 from that 16-yard line. You're going to do so with a 30-inch pattern versus a 12 or 16 or 18-inch pattern out of your improved mod or full choke that all your buddies and coaches are telling you to shoot, okay? Your score is going to go up so quickly and your breaks are going to be so nice, you're not going to even understand why you've been shooting these other chokes for so long, okay? I've actually got a lot of championship trap shooters these days, especially the younger kids that listen to the new technology, that actually take my advice. They will go out and they will shoot doubles trap with a U1 and a U2, which is basically like a Skeet IC and a light mod. And they will grind 25 straights back to back. And they cannot believe, their coaches and their parents cannot believe the type of breaks they're getting with a U1 and a U2 on doubles trap. You know, if you think about it, here's the thing that we don't think about as shooters sometimes. We don't really think about how far we're shooting a target when we change disciplines. So if we were shooting sporting clays, let's assume that we shoot sporting clays and trap. If we were shooting sporting clays and we had a target that showed us quite a bit of dome and it was only 25 yards away, what type of choke would you be shooting? Probably a Skeet or an IC, right? My chokes would be a U1. You would destroy that target. Well, then why is it you can walk out on a trap field, stand at the 16-yard line, shoot at a target that's 25 to 28 yards away, and feel like you have to have an improved mod or a full choke in the gun? Does it make any sense? No. So stop listening to all this old information that's been brought forward to us and really get out there and start to test more open chokes. Because I can assure you, with today's ammo, guns, and chokes, especially my chokes, most people out there are over choking, okay? So what you need to do, like I always talk about, and you'll hear me say it a lot, it may even be inundating, but I'm trying to really get it through to you, you need to get out there and shoot, okay? So shoot targets, you can shoot paper. Keep in mind, paper is only two-dimensional. It only gives you a little bit of a rough picture of what's really happening on that shot string. But you shoot targets with your chokes. You start opening up and you start seeing what happens. I promise you, it's going to open your eyes. You're going to start to open up. You're going to be crushing targets. You're going to be pulling the trigger on targets. And you're going to say in your head when you pull that trigger, man, I'm so far off that target, there's no way that's going to break. That target's going to break hard and you're going to be shocked. And the reason for that is because of the efficient patterns I created to the outer fringe. You can shoot a much more open choke now and get much harder, much more consistent breaks at extreme distances with this much bigger pattern because there are no holds in the pattern and the pellet distribution is so even throughout the entire pattern that you're never going to get a fly through. So when that target is out there and you're shooting this bigger pattern with my Muller chokes, what's happening is because of that even pellet distribution, that target's going to get hit by a lot more pellets than it would with a choke that had a hotter core if you were off slightly, okay? So even if you're on the outer fringe of my pattern, it's going to get hit with almost as many pellets as it would as if you centered it. So what that translates to is you're going to be able to use a much bigger pattern, a much more open choke, on a much further target than ever before. So just because we used to feel like we had to shoot a modified or a full choke on that target, now with my chokes you could get away with a U1 or U2 and crush that target consistently with a much bigger pattern, have a bigger margin of error, which is obviously going to translate to many more X's on your scorecard. Your average is going to go up and you're going to become a much better shooter a lot faster because your confidence is going to grow and you're going to realize that there's no target that you can no longer hit inside that certain distance with those chokes. So experiment with the more open chokes in mind. The Muller U0, U1, U2, absolutely amazing for 98% of the targets that are thrown. U3s, the really far FITAS targets. 27-yard handicap trap, the U3 is amazing. But for the most part, get out there, open up to the U0, the U1, and the U2, and see what you can do. And I rest assure you, your scores are going to go up, and you're going to be a lot happier that you opened up. Take care.